iHeartRadio presents Podversations, a weekly discussion with the biggest names and influencers in podcasting.
Hello, and welcome back to another great conversation in the iHeartPodcast speaker series. I'm Will Pearson, president of iHeartPodcast. Super excited about today's conversation. We are talking to the longtime host who was thrust into superstardom with the success of The Bachelor and all of its amazing spinoffs. Chris Harrison, thanks so much for joining us today.
Will, thanks for having me, and I'm happy to be a part of the iHeart family now.
We are so happy to have you. This podcast came out of the gate incredibly strong. I don't know if most people know this, but for a show, an ongoing show to come out of the gate and in its first month do over 1 million downloads, like that's pretty rare. We'll see that sometimes, with the limited series or the true crimes or the big comedies, but for an ongoing chat show, like it's hard to do that. You have accomplished that. I know this was what you set out to be your main goal in life. How are you feeling about it?
It has been an amazing experience, and it was something I was excited. Actually, let me be truthful. It was something I was reluctant to get into for quite some time because I'm a big fan of timing, and I just wanted the timing to be right to get this type of a platform. And when the timing felt right, there was only one place I was going to go. I already have an amazing relationship with iHeart and all of you, and I had known you guys for years. So I love the way you do business. I love the way you support your businesses. And that's kind of what we are, right? We're kind of individual entrepreneur business owners. And so who you partner with is important. And so to have that jumping off point, to have iHeart behind me, I felt like I could not fail. And I was hoping that the first couple of episodes would be received well. I didn't know they would go to number one. When we hit number one right out of the gate, I thought, okay, maybe we struck a chord here with the most dramatic podcast ever. So it has been really liberating and very cathartic to have this platform and to be able to speak to everybody over the last 6 to 8 weeks.
When your producer, one of our best producers here at iHeart, Amy Sugarman, came to us and said, we want to call it the most dramatic podcast ever, I thought she was joking at first, and then we realized like that is exactly what this should be called. Just go at it and describe it as that. Whose idea was it to call it that?
I wish I could say it's mine.
Yeah.
Amy Sugarman, who has been a dear friend of mine, also very responsible for getting me to this point where I said yes. We had talked about this for honestly over a year and a half. Mm-hmm. And being a friend, she said, okay, I'll back off. And then finally, when she hit me one more time, I thought, you know what? It is time. And when she came up with the most dramatic podcast ever, I'll admit my first instinct was absolutely not. There is no way I'm starting a podcast and I'm calling it that. And then the more it sat with me, the more I'm like, damn it. She's right. It's genius. Right. It is so genius.
Yeah.
And so, unfortunately, I can take no credit for that.
Yeah. Well, that's okay. It's working really well. And so
that's part of the iHeart team. Again, that's why you go with people you trust and you love.
That's exactly right. So this was a big decision for you to jump back into the spotlight. And I'm curious, just to ask you straightforward, were you nervous about returning to the spotlight?
Unbelievably. I was insecure. I was nervous. I had not spoken since I went through my ordeal and since I left the Bachelor, Bachelorette franchise. I did not speak publicly. I did no press, no podcasts, no interviews. And so I waited to let things settle in my own life, to come to terms with my own feelings and how I really felt. When something crazy happens, good or bad in your life, and you speak immediately on that, often your feelings change later and you thought, that's not really how I feel now. And so I wanted things to settle and come to terms with everything and know exactly what I wanted to say. And so when Amy and iHeart came to me, I was still so nervous because I had not spoken at all. So I was just so careful about what do I want to say? What do I want to convey for the first time in a year and a half? So those first 2 episodes, which I taped straight through, and I just spoke from the heart. There was no script. There was no notes. I just spoke. And Lauren Zima, my fiancé, was in the room. Amy Sugarman was in the room. There was a couple of other producers, and that was it. And I just spoke, and everybody was silent. And when I took off my headphones and I looked, and there were some tears in some people's eyes, and I thought, okay, I think that was it. And it was one take, one time, unedited, and we just put it out in the world. And so, there was a lot of trepidation when I released that, how it was going to be received.
Yeah, no, it was obviously the right way to do this. I'm curious, when you think about podcasts as a way to sort of re-enter and come back into the spotlight, what was it about podcasts that made this the right way for you to do this?
It's the platform, and it's owning the platform, and it's owning my own words.
Right.
And I'm not shading the press, the tabloids, or whatever. You know, I did those. I did that circuit for a long time. I did all the late night shows. I did GMA. I've done it over the last 20 years. But because there's time constraints, they're going to edit what you say, whether it's in a magazine or what have you. And so you don't always get to convey your true feelings. What I truly loved, and this is really what the straw that broke the camel's back and got me to come into the podcast world, was the fact that I own this platform, and iHeart agreed that I could speak from my heart and go unfiltered, unedited, raw, and let it all out there. And that was important to me, is not have a third party say, I don't know, we're going to change this, we're going to change this. And I kudos to iHeart, because that's a scary place for a business like you guys to be a part of as well, to say, no, we're just gonna let this go into the world, and it'll be received how it's received, and we'll deal with it. And so that was important to me, to come out of the gate and be able to just speak all my feelings, and say it as it was, and then you got to hear it unedited.
Now, having done that, we talked about the response in terms of numbers and people paying attention. And of course, as a business, we're always excited when we see those big numbers. But there's also like the actual response from a personal standpoint of listeners, of longtime fans, or people just jumping into the podcast who had been following, the news and everything. Were you surprised by the actual response from a feedback standpoint? What did you expect, and how did you feel about it when you started hearing from listeners?
Pleasantly surprised, and pleasantly surprised at how quickly it saturated the marketplace.
Yeah.
One of the blessings, and I guess maybe a curse, of my job is people felt like, I know Chris Harrison. He's been in my living room, and he talks relationships and love. And so people have always felt comfortable coming up to me at a bar, a restaurant, in an airport, and kind of pouring out their heart and emotions to me. And I've heard some really private things from people. Maybe things have gone too far sometimes as people explain their sex life to me. But that's one of the things I love. I love people, and I never minded that. And I think it might have been the first episode of the podcast. I said, one of the things I love is, please, if you see me, come up to me and say hi. Maybe I should have said that. But even this morning at the gym, I had someone walk up to me and say to me, hey, I just want to let you know, I'm loving your podcast. And so, to answer your question, one of the things I've always really loved is people would come up and say, I loved you on The Bachelor, loved you on The Bachelorette. It's something that brought my family together. Now people are going further and saying, by the way, love the podcast. I love you and Lauren Zima together. I love what you're talking about. Please keep it going. You're my escape, and even better, I feel like we have drawn new fans. People have come up to me and said, I don't listen to podcasts, but I'm listening to yours. You got me into this world. And that, it just makes you feel good. It makes you feel like you're being heard, and this is actually making a difference.
This is definitely one of those shows that, you're right, brings new people into podcasting, which we're always aiming to do. But the conversation that it generates and gets people to check it out is pretty awesome. Now, you mentioned Lauren being a part of the show, and she's actually been a regular on the show so far. And it seems to me like this is one of the first times that you've really been more publicly open about your private life. Like, maybe talk about that a little bit. I know that's probably got to be a little nerve-wracking, but maybe you're getting into a comfort zone where you're like, this is the place to do this.
You're exactly right. You hit the nail on the head. It's something that I was always very careful. I was married before when I was on The Bachelor. I have 2 children. I was very controlled about my private life, especially my kids growing up. Luckily, blessed, they are in college now. They are grown adults. I don't have to protect them as much and their life. And so one of the bits of trepidation of this was finding my sea legs. I knew the first 2 episodes were going to be me speaking my experience and my feelings about what happened. But then where does the show go? That's not the show. And I wanted to make it very clear that this was not going to be the show. And I'm not just going to go on and talk about The Bachelor and Bachelorette, because honestly, I don't watch it anymore. So what was the show going to be? And Lauren Zima was always the wild card. She's the ace up the sleeve. She's very beloved. She's incredibly talented. She is an amazing comedic mind and unbelievably brilliant and great when it comes to relationships, which is why I love her and why I want to marry her. But we weren't sure where she would fit into all this. And finding our sea legs, we started doing the headlines off the top of the show, and she would join me. And I thought maybe eventually I would just get to guess and have guests do that. But Lauren became so popular and such a hit, and people were inevitably coming up to me and saying, we love Lauren. We need more Lauren. So
I'm like, you can just stay home. We actually just want this to be the Lauren show.
People say, I like you. We love Lauren Zima. So now it has become, we found this niche. And to further your question, yeah, opening up our lives felt right. And luckily, Lauren is a great communicator, and I've been doing this for quite some time. And so we feel pretty comfortable talking about our life, our love, and that's not perfect, and that we do have fights, and that it's messy at times. And I think it just makes it real and relatable. I've never loved people who just live via one positive quote after another, like their life is perfect. It's easy to live life when you're a champion and on top. What's it like when it's messy? And in diving into that has been important. And so, yeah, revealing and unveiling our own lives, I think, is a big part of the trust we've built.
How's Lauren liking it? Does she want to do more?
She's on every week. She did take a girls trip last week, so she was gone, but she's back this week. We're busy recording today, and it's amazing. One of the things I love about Lauren is in our real lives, we're never short on conversation. We can discuss anything, and it takes us into all kinds of great areas of our own relationship and love and life. And so that's what the show has become. At least the first part is Lauren and I kind of going through the headlines, going through what's going on in our lives, and then getting to the big guest of the week. And that's, we seem to have found a pattern here that's really worked, and it's resonated well with the fans. And so for now, we'll do that. But the show can ebb and flow. It's one of the great things about podcasts is we're not confined by anything. And so whatever the day brings us, that's what we're going to do.
Yeah, no, I love it. And, it's obviously not the first podcast that is sort of spun out of the Bachelor world, but it is one that I think has carved its own space. And I think that's why so many people are coming to listen to it. You talked about those first couple of episodes and really giving you a chance to sort of communicate and process and everything that you had been through and thought through. But maybe talk about the podcast going forward. If for those that haven't checked it out yet, what should they expect? How would you describe the mission of the podcast?
I think of this as I'm an athlete. I played sports my whole life, and I feel like we're just really getting in shape here. I feel like I'm just hitting my stride, and I knew there was going to be a learning curve. I have been in this business for quite some time. It took a long time to become an overnight sensation, as they say. So I was in the media business since college and working in local news, and I did sports radio. So it wasn't foreign to me, but at the same time, when it's your show, as you know, it's different. And so you have to find that pattern. You have to find the way you're producing it and what works and what doesn't. And that is just honestly trial and error. And it's listening back, and it's being critical, and it's Lauren and I being critical of each other. Sometimes it's hard to hear, but you have to listen to that and things that really resonate when people come up to me on the street. What are they loving? What sinks in with them? And I've always loved interviews, and I going forward, I will definitely continue that. But it's not just about your project. It's not what you're doing. And look, I know people are going to come on and sell what they're doing, and that's totally fine. I get it. I've done it a million times. But I think I have earned the trust and respect out there in the world that we can go deeper with Tori Spelling, going into her love life. I'm going to be talking to Jennifer Nettles and Jenny McCarthy today, going into their lives, their prior relationships, getting divorced, rebuilding that in the public eye. So I just have, because of the life I've lived and because of the job I've held, and people know me for a certain thing, I think I can go a little bit deeper and in a different avenue. So it won't be your typical interview, I guess, is what I'm trying to get at. And I love that. And it seems to be resonating with others. And then definitely Lauren and I think she is, again, the secret ingredient is going to be more Lauren Zima.
Yeah. Well, Well, you know, mentioned the conversation with Tori, and it's interesting because you've had a few guests on that also have very successful podcasts of their own. Obviously, Tori with 90210 MG, which is part of the family here, but also former Bachelorette Caitlin Bristow, which, you know, that was a conversation that generated a lot of attention too. But giving some of these people an opportunity to step away from what they're talking about most of the time, day to day. You know, Tori doesn't talk a ton about her personal life. She does a little bit, obviously, and 90210 MG, but maybe talk about that a little bit, that those two conversations, Tori and Caitlin, and what those were like, and sort of your takeaway from having had those.
Well, and one of the bizarre parts of me doing this show is sometimes I am in those headlines, and Caitlin made big headlines when she was basically saying our relationship was in the toilet, and she spoke out on this and it made a bunch of headlines. And so the great thing about having your own platform, boom, that's the show. Call Caitlin. She is a friend. Get her on here and let's talk about this. And we did not talk before. And again, I go back to my Bachelor days. Don't ever talk to, you know, who you're interviewing right before you interview her. I said, if you don't mind, we're going to play this out on air. Whether it goes south, whether we end up fighting, whether we make up, this is going to be the show. And she agreed to that. And again, there's a trust factor there. And I think I have earned that trust over the years. And I think people really loved hearing that raw, honest conversation with Caitlin and I of, there's a misunderstanding here. This is how I see it. Tell me how you see it. And because to just throw away that love and that relationship, it's a shame. And I think people can relate to that in their own lives. We've all done that where, you know, and even Tori Spelling, same thing when she talked about her mom and the headlines and the tabloids that broke them apart. Her and Shannon Doherty, that was a fascinating conversation when she let us in on the fact that her and Shannon Doherty were driven apart, scared of each other because they felt like the other one hated each other. And the truth was, there was never anything. It was completely fabricated by the press, and they ran into each other, of all places, at the Playboy Mansion, and they reconnected. And that was almost a great friendship that was thrown away for nothing. And so getting to those conversations and diving deep with these interviews, I think, is something I'm very adept at, something I've been doing for quite some time. And so, you know, I just think I have that skill set. As I say, I'm not a doctor, but I played one on TV for quite some time. And so it is a great pleasure of mine to not only get to an interview, but to get deep with somebody where I feel like I'm really underneath their world, and we're pulling back the curtain, and they trust me enough to go there.
Yeah, and you can tell that. So, and speaking of trust, you obviously have a big fan base as well, and I think it was a bold and interesting and really good move to also hear directly from fans. You know, you're taking calls from fans. Was that nerve-wracking at all? And do you mind talking to them about The Bachelor? What's that been like?
There again, I use this word a lot now, trepidation. I was a little scared that, you know, opening the phone lines and legitimately just putting up a hotline on my social media and just see where people called from and what they wanted to say. I will continue this because I love the connection with the fans. I want to get more into, as you talk about where's the show going to go, I want to get more into relationships and dealing with relationship problems, whether people email me, talk about, you know, give me a topic or take phone calls. I think those are great because, again, it's just relatable. We all have, that's what was great about The Bachelor and Bachelorette. Look, maybe you're not on a hot air balloon, maybe you're not in Tahiti, but you know what these people are feeling. You know what they're going through. You know what it's like to be dumped. You know what it's like to be hopeful of love. It's that one thing that we all have this insatiable appetite for. It's companionship. And so I don't mind talking about the show when people were asking me. I mean, look, it can go too deep and too personal. There's just some things I can't talk about. But The Bachelor in general is something that gave me an amazing platform. It's led to this. It led to us talking. It's something I'm grateful for. It changed my life. So it will always hold a very special place in my heart. I'm glad I was able to separate and move on, and I'm excited about this next stage. Yeah. But I will always be grateful for that time in my life.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. Well, with the success of this show, and actually before you launched this show, I know you'd been noodling on different ideas for podcasts. So before we let you go, you know, you are interested in the whole production side of podcasting. and have some other thoughts in mind. What are you thinking about in terms of the future of Chris Harrison and podcasts?
Now, one of the things that you and I talked about, I was very serious. I can only do things one way, and I'm either in or I'm not. So I told iHeart, I said, guys, I'm 100% in, which means I really will produce this show, and I will work on, getting guests. And I know the great thing about iHeart is they have a pretty incredible Rolodex of people to get to as well. So we've been able to kind of share creatively, but it was important to me that we create an entire network, and I will and want to produce more shows. The big umbrella will be relationships. But I think there's relationships in all kinds of worlds, even like money. What's our relationship with money? Financial. There are different kind of tentacles that we will send out and start creating new shows. I knew the tent pole was going to be me hosting a show. We needed to launch the most dramatic podcast ever. And I knew in its success, a rising tide lifts all boats. We can do more stuff. And then people, again, will see the success of this show and say, oh, yes, I will be a part of his network because success and motion begets motion. So it will be a good thing. And this stone is already starting to roll. And we have some great concepts that we're pitching, but I also want the next one to be a really good one as well. I'm a little psychotic about trying to succeed in life. So luckily, I've signed up with the right company, and iHeart has such an incredible touch. The producers I work with, yourself, iHeart, and I am sucking up a little bit, but iHeart has this amazing ability to see an idea and let you know, yes, it will work, or it won't because of this, or maybe we twist it this way. So having this collaboration with people who have been doing this since the inception of radio, much less podcasts, it is such a depth of talent to work with. And I am so grateful. And again, one more reason why I chose, out of all the areas and places I could have gone and companies, I went to iHeart at the end of the day to do this podcast.
Well, we appreciate that, but it definitely takes a partnership. We can't make a great show without great talent and great ideas. But for those that have not yet checked it out, you've got to check it out. The most dramatic podcast ever. It lives up to the name. It lives up to the hype with Chris Harrison. But Chris, one more time, thanks for joining us, and congratulations on the success of the show.
Thank you so much. And beyond the fans and all that, I've really been excited that the advertisers are showing up in full force now and wanting to be a part of this show in particular. And that just means you're striking that chord and you're hitting the right audience and doing it the right way. So I'm proud of the most dramatic podcast ever. I'm proud to be with iHeart, and thank you so much for not only this opportunity today, but just in general to launch this platform with you guys.
That's awesome. Thanks again, Chris. Take care. And to everybody else, we'll see you again next week.
Podversations is a production of iHeartRadio. You can find more from the biggest names in podcasting on the iHeartRadio app or wherever you get your podcasts.